everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library. And welcome to 2025. We finally made it. 2024 is done. I believe when this video comes out, it is actually January 6th. So we're like half a week into January, so yay. It is time for a fresh start. But before we are able to move on, I thought let's go ahead and wrap up 2024 once and for all so it can be put to rest. So before we begin, I want to start with my stats from 2024. I have them right here on my story graph, and I thought they're kind of fun statistics. So let's go ahead and take a look. As with every year, I set a reading goal of 25 books because I know I can do it, because it's not an overwhelming number, and because it's just what it's tradition. Right? So of those 25 books, I ended up reading 104 books. I cracked 100 books this year. In fact, I surpassed 100 books, which is not a feat I've done very often. Surprisingly enough, I tend to average at around 50 to 60 books a year. So 25 is like a good number. It's like half that. If I surpass it, great. If I don't, whatever. 100 books is not something I accomplish very often because I am just so busy. So I am so stoked that I not only hit 100 books, but I actually almost hit 105 books. Like, that's insane to me. Total number of pages ended up being 33,988. I was almost at 34,000. I'm a little mad about it, but it's still an insane number of pages. Now, everyone knows I'm a fantasy girly, and that's true. My top genre for this year was fantasy, in which I read 43 books of them. My second highest genre, surprisingly enough, was romance at 33 books. And then it was YA, which was kind of a catch-all, which ended up being 21 books. I read 18 volumes of manga, and I read 16 LGBTQIA plus books. Honestly, I think a nice spread over the year. I did try a lot more genres and formats this year. Like, I started reading more audiobooks. I dove into dark romance. I've been trying to prioritize graphic novels a little bit more. I read stuff out of my comfort zone, and I think that is reflected in my actual genres, despite the fact that fantasy still is queen, and she always will be, because I'm just that girl. My average rating for the year was a 3.64 star rating, so we'll round it down to a 3.5 star rating. So not the best year, but also not the worst. I had some really high months where I was hitting almost a 4-star rating average, but I also had some really bad reads this year, which we're not gonna talk about. We're gonna not bring that negativity with us into the new year. We're just gonna leave it in the past. So those are my stats for 2024. One thing I want to wrap up before we move on to the part everyone's here for, which is the best books I read in 2024. There was another challenge I did attempt in 2024 that did not go as well as I planned. So at the start of 2024, I had the bright idea of doing the 24 for 2024 challenge, which was doable because, again, my goal is 25 books a year. I always hit that number, or I usually hit that number with no issue, but it's something about that list that just made me avoid it more and more. So I have a visual representation of how well I did. So these are all the books I read from the 2024 challenge. So if we can actually get them out of here. This is the sticks. I think some of these aren't actually from the 24. I think they're also just like books I've read from my own collection, which this is pretty damn good for reading from my TBR. I think Goodreads said I read about 50 books that were my own collection, so that is that. And then here's a representation of the books I didn't get to from my 24 for 2024 challenge. So we're gonna go ahead and count these, and I'll tell you the ones that I ended up not reading. So I have 11 books here, which means I read 13 books of my 24 for 2024 challenge. The ones I didn't read were Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames, Babel by R.F. Kuang, Passenger by Alexandria Bracken, The Issachar Falcon by K.S. Veloso, Boundary Side by Robert Jackson Bennett, Aristotle and Dante, The Waters of the World, the second of the Aristotle Dante series by Benjamin Alier-Senez, Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington, The Crow Girl by Eric Axel Sund, and last but not least, The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Those are all the books I didn't get to in my 24 for 2024 challenge because honestly, a lot of these in this stack were books I was really intimidated by. I just never found myself in the mood for, or I read one book by the author and like wasn't here for it, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So these will be going back in the rotation. I will not be just unhauling them. I will at least try to give them a chance, especially if they are part of a series. In fact, that KS Veloso one will be part of the upcoming challenge I'm going to be doing for this year, which is aimed at getting me to continue a series I am already reading. So it's not like I'm picking whole brand new books to start that I may be intimidated by that is going to, be the reason why they still end up in a jar, but rather be things I actually am interested in continuing and I've just been putting off for whatever reason. That is something I talked more about in my last video at the end of the vlog, where I talked about the updates I want to do for this channel. I just, look at the stat. That's pretty damn good for reading books that I own rather than books I'm just getting from the library, even though I did use the library a lot more this year. Okay. But now the part you're all here for. It is, what are the best books that I read in 2024? And I read a lot of them. I had about 21 4-star reads and I believe 9 5-star reads. So every book on this list is at minimum 4 stars, at most 5 stars. They were all so good and left an impression on me that going back and reviewing the books that I read for this list, these are the ones like, yes, I need to talk about this. Yes, this was so good. I need to just share this with you guys. I do have some honorable mentions that I don't think were my best reads of the year, but I think were a lot of fun and like left that lasting impact. And I actually want to start with those. So the first book up for the honorable mentions is The Bromance Book Club by Lindsay K. Adams. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. I picked this up for kind of a palate cleanser to just kind of get it out of my way. It's something that's been on my shelf for a while. And then I read it and I just had so much fun. Like, it is everything I wanted from a book called The Bromance Book Club. And I'll be honest, if I see the sequels when I go out in the wild book shopping, I am going to pick them up because it was just so much fun, and I'm very curious to see what the story is for the other members of this book club because they were all like silly and sweet, and I felt like this was a really good depiction of a adult romance relationship, which I feel like we kind of get lost in like the drama of things, but I feel like this was very recognizable drama and still, again, a lot of fun. The next honorable mention I have is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is the perfect blend between fiction and nonfiction because we have a very kind of magical realism lens in which we are viewing the story of an actual abuse relationship that the author goes through, and kind of her thoughts and feelings of how she fell into this relationship, why she stayed so long in this relationship, as well as kind of how she ended up getting out of it. This was such an interesting read. It's a hard read because we are dealing with real life abuse and the cycles of it. I remember reading this and just being like, damn, this was so good. And just so fascinating in how the author kind of like unfolded the story. It was a really great read. Again, a hard read, but it's one that just, again, left a lasting impact that as I was making this list, I was thinking about this book and like, I needed to talk about it. And the last honorable mention I have is actually the last book I read for 2024, and that is Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. This one gets a recommendation for a couple of things. One, it is the last book I read, and it's the most memorable because I literally just finished it. But also, I want to give this a shout out because the magic system and the world building this is something that I haven't seen in a while. I read a lot of fantasy, so fantasy has all these tropes and these kind of things, and they all tend to blur together really, and it just like keeps hitting my expectations over and over again, and like that can get a little annoying. Reading Mask of Mirrors was so refreshing because the magic system is something I haven't really seen in fantasy, and just like the alchemical nature of it reminded me a lot of Full Metal Alchemist, which is one of my favorite animes ever, and the way the story unfolded and how we are flipping between multiple character perspectives and each of them had their own interesting plot and they were all interconnected. I very, very much adored this journey, and I'm very excited to continue on with this series in 2025. So be on the lookout for the next one because your girl is gonna pick it up and she's gonna figure out what she's gonna do about the third book because I don't own it, and the Broken Bindings next series is this series. So that's a problem for future Emily. She'll hate past Emily, but that's not my problem right now, you know? Honorable mentions done. It is time to get to the best list. Now, these are not in any particular order, and I'm not going to be going over what each of these books are necessarily. I'm going to tell you why I love them and kind of what made them stand out to me for this list, because I do a lot of big brain like thinking in my day-to-day life. I'm a PhD student and I'm a literature PhD student. I have to work through books analytically. I have to think about their greater implications, which is not what I like to to do in my free time and my fun time when I'm reading. These books are books that I just really enjoyed and I felt were really good stories in their own unique ways and their own unique characters, and I think that a lot of people could enjoy. So that is the basis for this list. None of these books are going to be in any sort of order. They're just going to be purely on vibes and how I stack them when I grab them from my bookshelves. So the first one up I have is Spellbound by F.T. Lukens. Like, first off, just look at the pretty cover. It's so shiny and foily, which fits the whole magical vibe because not only do we have magic, but we have this kind of intersection with technology. This book was so much fun for as short it is. F.T. Lukens has just like such a way of capturing this really cute relationship as well as having a lot of representation in a really tight packed story. And this is a perfect like palate cleanser. If you're finding yourself really stuck on like what to read, F.T. Lukens is a master at this. But what I really enjoyed about Spellbound was just how cute the relationship is and how much we got to see the interactions with side characters rather than just the main relationship that is going on between our two main characters. That is something I feel like gets really lost in the wayside as a lot of people just focus on the romance in our like romantasy, dark romance era that we tend to be in, that we forget about that relationships extend more than just beyond the romance. There are friendships, there are familial relationships, and I feel like this book does a really good job of balancing all those different types and making each character kind of stand out and be a lot of fun. This book also gave me one of my favorite characters from the year, which of course is Antonia, the darling that she is. Okay, I love her so much. Such a badass, and I need a whole book dedicated to her. The next book I have is one of two books I have from this author, and that is The City of Brass by Shannon Chakraborty. This was the year of Shannon Chakraborty for me, okay? I adored her. I found her this year, or rather, I read her this year, because I've owned this book for a while, and I had the other book also, I think last year. I'm sold. I understand while everyone and their mother is obsessed with Shannon Chakraborty because she's that girl. She's that girl, and I'm here for it, and I'm so excited to dive into each and every one of her worlds. And City of Brass is the second book I actually read from her. I actually read this in the last half of 2024, and my god, this book was so good that I was reading another book that had a very similar plot and a very similar setting, and yet this is the one that stuck out, and I got almost zero details wrong as I'm moving into the second book. It was that girl, okay? It was so good. The magic system's very interesting. The characters are very cool. The world, the drama, the political intrigue, everything about City of Brass was so good. And now I understand the hype that goes on with this book because I get it. It is good. It is that good. Everything you've heard about this book, everything you've been kind of like maybe putting off because you're worried that it's overhyped, read it. Try it. And if you are afraid of how chunky this is, pick up the audiobook because guess what? The audiobook is just as good. It's just as good. I love this. I did this a hybrid reading, so I listened to, I want to say the first half, maybe first 2/3 of this via audiobook, and then I picked this up. No difference. It was amazing start to finish. The drama, what happens at the end, the kind of complicated relationship between the characters, everything about this was so good, and I understand why everyone hypes up this series and says there's no bad book. Because if this was just book one, if this was the setup for the rest of the series, say less. I'm gonna be reading each and every one of these. You can expect that. You can expect these books to show up in vlogs because I'm not letting this go. So the next book I have is actually could be replaced with any books in the series because I read, I think, 4 or 5 books in this series and I loved every one of them. And that is The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. This is All Systems Red, book 1. If you need like a sci-fi and like you're terrified of sci-fi and you don't know kind of where to start or what to expect and you're kind of intimidated by how big sci-fi gets, pick these up. They're novella length and they read so fast, so quick and so fun, and you're just gonna love the character because do not be put off by the name Murderbot, which sounds very intimidating. Sounds like it's gonna be a very bloody series, and there is action, but we are following a character who all they want to do is sit around and watch telenovelas. Read this book. Read this entire series. It is so good. It is so much fun. They're so fast. Again, all the books are almost this length. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 that are longer, and by longer they're like 300 or so pages. They're so good. There's a reason why you've been hearing Martha Wells pop up on BookTube time and time again from all the big creators and all the small creators because Martha Wells is so good at what she does. So this is the first of the many to come because your girl's gonna buy the entire series. Continuing on with the short novels, my next one is When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. Now, this book took me by surprise because the only other Veronica Roth book that I've read was Divergent, and I hated Divergent. I'm sorry to say it, I hated Divergent. I read it when it came out. I was the age demographic to read it, and I did not enjoy it whatsoever. I hated the book so much. And so I didn't get it. I didn't get the Veronica Roth like standing and saying she was amazing because I didn't see it. So when she came out with When Among Crows, I was a little skeptical because I didn't know what to expect from her writing. I didn't know how she was gonna be able to handle a true fantasy because she was just like a dystopian girl, and no one was talking about it. Like, this book came out and there was kind of like crickets. I think everyone kind of forgot about Veronica Roth, if I'm honest. They shouldn't have, because When Among Crows was so good. This book is so short and I need it to be a million times the length because this book does what books that are like twice its length can't do, and that is tell a very concise and very interesting story with a really interesting kind of cool like magic curse system. Books can't do in 300, 400 pages, but this book does it in less than 200. Make it make sense. It was so intriguing. I really loved it. I would love for her to turn this into a full-blown series because the cast of characters are so intriguing, and I think they click so well together as individuals and as a unit that I just fell in love with each and every one of them, and I was really sad to let them go when the story ended, especially because, again, the magic system was just developed enough to like give you a taste of what could be. And I really like that this was based on Russian mythos, like Eastern European mythos, because we have things like Baba Yaga, which I feel is like something we don't see a lot in fantasy. We tend to see a lot of Western European, and we've been getting a lot more of like Eastern mythos, but I would love to see more Eastern European come into play because Russian mythos is fucking creepy, and this book does a great job of pulling that up. The next book up is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This is the very first Hank Green book I've read. I've had this for, I think, a full year. I think I got this at the start of January last year. I didn't have any expectations going into this book. All I've heard from people is that this book is really good. I've heard that it had to deal with like a social commentary on social media and YouTube. And wow, yeah, it is. It is such a great read, and it's a sleeper read because I remember going into this book thinking, man, I don't know if this book is for me. I kind of hate the main character, but that was the point. I was not supposed to like her. I was supposed to see all the issues with her and then see how she kind of falls further and further into her own pitfall. And just the way in which we uncover the mystery, we see kind of like social media taking a bigger and bigger role and seeing how it affects our main character. And then the ending. The only reason why I haven't finished the series, because it's only a duology, is because I do not own the second book. But best believe that I'm going to be going out and buying the second book, and I want it in a matching hardback edition. So that is my goal. That is what I'm going to do. The sequel is going to be read very early because I've been craving it and I've been on a book buying ban, so I haven't had a chance to go out and buy it. But it's happening. It's happening. I need to know how this story ends. I really do. The next one up is Night Eaters by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. So this is a graphic novel series by the same author who did Monstrous, which is one of the best reads I had in 2023. So like I was already excited to kind of start this one, but wow, was it so good. I just really love the dark nature of Marjorie Liu's writing. I think it's so fascinating. I think she does such an amazing job of telling this really dark tale and exploring it in these like really intricate art styles. I also think she does an amazing job in depicting this kind of like complicated relationship between families and intergenerational families where we have a parent who seemingly doesn't approve of anything their child does, and these two kids trying to not only gain the approval but also finding out the supernatural implications of maybe why their mother is acting this way. This series already has 2 volumes out, and I read the first one, immediately bought the second one, and then immediately read the second one, and both are so good. Both could be on this list, but I think the start of the series is really where everyone needs to begin. I haven't really been telling you anything about these books, but I'm really not going to tell you what is going on in this book because I feel like this is a book that is meant for you to go in knowing nothing and kind of trying to unravel things as you're in the story, because that will just add so much more to the experience. Next up, we have A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is the very first S.T. Gibson book I've ever read of hers, and I thought I was going to hate this book. I read this book because of the Magical Readathon, and I had a prompt, and I thought I was going to hate it. Really and truly, because this book has always been marketed as a historical Dracula telling, but with a queer lesbian romance at the heart of it. Parts of those sound really good, like the queer lesbian romance, yes. Dracula, yes. Historical, ugh, not for me. I am not a historical girly whatsoever. And I thought I was going to dread reading this and having to read it because I had to read it for the challenge. Do not listen to the marketing for this book. This book is so good. It is not a retelling of Dracula. It is an introspection look at Dracula, who is not even named once in this book, because this is an epistolary text, much like the original Dracula, following the perspective of his wife. I actually liked this book a lot too, in the Dream House, because we are following an emotional, abusive relationship and just the way in which someone survives that and the way in which someone gets out of that. And the writing in this is so fucking beautiful. It kept me going back time and time again. I was so interested in where this was gonna go. I was so intrigued. I would put this book down, be thinking about it and thinking about it, and then having to pick it back up because I just wasn't done reading. You go into this book with the right mindset that this is not a romance. It is not. In any way, shape, or form. Yes, there is romantic elements to it. There is a polycule that happens in it. However, this is at its heart about an abusive relationship and the way in which that our main character Constanta survives it. All right, and the very last book I had, I already hinted at it. You already probably can guess. It is another Shannon Chakraborty, and it is The Adventures of Mina Al-Sarafi, which it's very fitting that I have the very, very pretty Fairy Loot edition, because this book, I think, was my favorite book of 2024. Everything else wasn't in an order. I think this one should be at the top. It should be the book we end on, because it was my favorite read of 2024. I had so much fun with this book. Like I said, Shannon Chakraborty just has a way of writing that captivates you in such a way that I listened to this via audiobook, and this is the one that changed my mind about my ability to read and enjoy audiobooks, because most of the time I can't do it. I'm so bored. I get distracted super duper easily, but there is something about this story and the narrator she chose and the way she crafted her story that really just kind of pulled me in and made me more and more interested, because not only do we get the piratey adventures you're kind of wanting with this book, but you're also getting an older protagonist who has spent her heydays traveling and adventuring the world, has done all the things that we read about in these, like, with these earlier protagonists, but also is taking a real look at, okay, what do you do when you're done with that? How do you make a life after that? And how does it keep pulling you back in if that's the life you've been living? I love the maybe hint of romance we got in this. I love the relationships. Her friends were so fucking funny. There are several times I was reading this book and listening to it and laughing out loud, just because their relationship was so cute and just would remind me of like silly shit I would do with my own friends during D&D, or just like the way in which I felt and held people in my own life. I loved how I would be driving home and it'd take me an hour and a half to get home some days, and I would still just park in my driveway and listen to this audiobook for more, because I just couldn't stop. It was everything I wanted and everything I didn't know I needed in 2024. It was the adventure text that I think that if I could take away one book from this list, this would be the one. This would go into my top 10 books, maybe even my top 5 books that I've loved and read of all time. And again, this is the book that sold me on Shannon Chakraborty. This is the book that made her an auto-buy, because wow, if this is what she could do in just one volume that I thought was a standalone, and I'm so excited. It is actually the start of a new trilogy. I'm here for it. I'm gonna buy every book. I'm gonna buy everything this person writes. She can write a grocery list and I'm going to buy it, okay? If you read one book from this list, please let it be The Adventures of Mina Al-Sarafi. It's so good. It's such a breath of fresh air in dealing with like Middle Eastern mythos and these really cool and vibrant settings, and a lot of representation packed in each of the characters that she presents on the page, that we also get to hear their voices. So I recommend everything on this list, but I definitely recommend The Adventures of Mina Al-Sarafi. Okay, but that is my best books of 2024. I hope you enjoyed this list. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, or let me know what was your best book in 2024. What did you love? What did you hate? What do you wish you could read over again for the first time? There are several books on my list that I wish I could wipe from my memory just so I can experience them again. But that's it for me. I hope you guys had a wonderful 2024, and I hope 2025 kicks ass for you too. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!